Hello and welcome to the Srijan Wednesday webinars. If you're joining us for the first time, this is a community initiative by Srijan Technologies, where you can tune into a variety of sessions across the fields of technology, entrepreneurship, and community building. In today's session, we are joined by Ori Bendet, Inbound Product Manager at HPE Software. Ori will take us through the challenges in current testing processes and then dive into the importance of analytics-driven testing and how best to bring it into practice. Before we begin, I would request all participants to please type in any questions that you might have during the session, and we will take them up in the last 15 minutes of the webinar. Also, please don't forget to take the conversation live on Twitter using our hashtag SrijanWW. You can share your thoughts by tagging us in your tweets using our handle @Srijan. So, are we all set then? Let's get right to it. Ori, over to you now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here. Let's jump right into it. So what if I can tell you that I am now able to help you reduce your regression testing time, but by more than 80%? You are probably wondering how can this be done? And in today's session, I'm going to show you how it can easily be done and some practices on how to implement the use of analytics as part of your day-to-day testing. Hi everyone, my name is Ori Bendet. I am currently an inbound product manager at HPE. I started my career in testing where I started as an automation engineer. I then was a team leader and I ended up being a QA manager for a total of 5 years. I was able to take part of some of the leading products from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. You probably know some of them: Load Runner, Executive Scorecard, Storm Runner Load, UFT, which was previously QTP. And in the last 2.5 years, I am the product manager for a new cloud offering that it's called Storm Runner Functional. So I'm really excited to be here, and let's talk about what we are going to talk today. So we're going to start with kind of an overview of today's application development. What are the mega trends? What is changing? What is different from today than from a couple of years ago? We'll move to today's testing challenges. What are these changes have to do with the testing? How the testing has been changed, and which challenges these changes in the development are creating for the testing teams. We are going to talk a bit about the risks that these challenges create, show you a real-world example, and explain to you how you can empower your testing by using analytics. So let's talk today, let's start with talking about how the world of software is changing. What are the mega trends that we see, and how are they changing the way that we are developing the application? So the first one is around mobile. Just think 5 years ago, not everyone would have a smartphone, and today the majority of the people in most countries and in most industries have access to a mobile smartphone, and the majority of the application are being consumed through a mobile device. We also see the trend of going to the cloud, where more and more critical applications are no longer developed as an on-premise application, but rather being stored in the cloud in its different deployment, whether we are talking about a public cloud or a hybrid cloud or a private cloud. The need to go to the cloud in order to increase the speed of development is happening, and we see an increase of that. The next trend is around the digital. So we see more and more companies going digital. We see banks that has mobile application. We see insurance companies that are completely handled and managed through a web application and mobile application. And we also see the last trend, which is the DevOps. So everything is continuous. Everything is going faster. The development is faster. We push to production every couple of weeks. We have more and more applications that are being released, and it's no longer one release every couple of months or years. Just to summarize, it actually means that we are developing faster. Our users are expected us to deliver faster. We want to get to the market faster. We want to increase the value of our brand. We want to make sure that our customer retention and attraction is higher. And of course, we want to reduce cost. On the left, you can see how much data is being generated, how fast the world is changing, whether it's the amount of tweets or emails or applications or sales that happens every minute. And this is, by the way, a fact from 2014. If you will Google up the latest results, then you will see that these numbers are actually much, much higher. So what are the challenges that these changes in the way that we develop and consume application has for the testing teams? So the first category talks about the test lifecycle management, where we have a more complex and distributed application. This is no longer the simple client server or desktop client that talks to one server. We have a client that can be a mobile application or a browser that can talks to a server that runs microservices behind the scenes and talks to a third-party payment server. So it means that our application is no longer independent, and we need to focus and to test it together with the rest of the components. The second item is the fact that we need to test as early in the development cycle as possible. This is no longer the waterfall way, where there was a phase for developing the application and then there was a phase for testing the application. Everything is being done as early as possible. We need to provide constant feedback, continuous testing, and we can't wait to the end to make sure that the quality happens. The last item is around the fact that we see more and more testing teams are bringing their own tools and processes, and also the bring your own tool methodology, where every testing team in the different silos of the organization can define and decide on their own tools, whether they are using vendor tools or whether they are using open source, as long as they deliver the quality that they are required from their management team. The next item is around the test design. So here we see two trends to begin with. The one is the shift left, where we see the testing teams are getting closer and closer to the development team. They are more technical. They want to write their tests and their scripts inside the IDE of the developers. They want to reshare their assets with their development team, and they don't want to waste any more time on setting up testing environments and testing tools. The shift right is on the other side of the agenda. So the shift right means that we see the more business-oriented, the SMEs, the manual testers, pitching in and taking part as part of the automation agenda. So we want a way to give the less technical, the more business-oriented, an easy way to test and to automate the application. The second item here is around the importance of test data. So today, it's no longer sufficient to simply test the functionality of the application, but we also need to use valuable data. The story that I like to tell here is that we had a meeting with one of our largest customers, and they are one of the largest entertainment firms in the world. And they said that they had an issue in production where their entire registration system went down because they didn't test the use case of having a family name with only one letter. And this caused them, their entire system to go down in production. And as we already talked, you can just think of how many, what was the effect on the revenue and how much money they lost during this downtime. The last item here is something that we all see all the time, is around the multiple platform devices, languages, the bring your own device. It means that for us as the testing team, we have more and more things that we need to test. We can't assume anything on the environment that our customers and users will use. Just think of how many operating systems and browsers and mobile devices there is today. And if you'll take into account the rest of the items that affect the testing, for example, the network condition, the geographical conditions, these also affect, and we need to make sure that we cover everything, because our users expect our application to behave with the same quality in all of the different conditions. The last challenge is around the test execution and maintenance. Here, we actually need to do more with less. We have more things to test, but we don't have more time. We have less time, which connects to the second item where the execution time is critical. And because we are working with continuous testing, because we need to test as early as possible, and we want to provide constant feedback, we can't have test suites that run overnight or even over weekends, as we got used to it in the past. But we need to provide feedback as a matter of minutes or even seconds, and this is why the execution time is critical. The last item is around the rapid development. So because today we are releasing more applications and more builds and more version all the time, we can come one day and the entire application has changed completely overnight. And it means that for us, we need to make sure that our automation tests and testing scripts are actually robust and can be easily maintained across time, even with rapid change. So these are the challenges. So what it actually means is that there is a lot more of what we need to test, where we have more devices, we have more permutation, more conditions, more data that we need to test. But however, we have less time to test it, which means that we have releases of 1 week, of 1 month, rather than in a few years ago, we had half a year releases, we had release every 1 year. And now we are talking about shrinking it to continuous, and there are even companies today that can deliver their new application in a matter of hours or in a matter of a daily release to all of the customers. Having said that, it doesn't mean that we can hurt the quality of our application, because as already said, we as the customers and our customers are actually expecting the application to be with perfect quality, regardless of where they are using it, on which device they are using it, and on which condition they are using it. The risk here and the fact that if we will have defects that are in production, and you can see the number here, so it means that each defect that we miss as the testing team has direct impact both on the revenue of our company and also on the perception of our brand. So we are no longer making sure that we find the defects and the development team are fixing it, but we rather protecting the brand of our company. And this is the number of how much it costs not to fix the defect, and what it costs the American industry only in a year. So how can we mitigate this risk? So the first thing is actually quite obvious. We can have more testers, but as we said, we don't have more budget, and I'm not sure that everyone can come to its manager and ask for more testers simply because they have more items to test. The second thing is to crowdsource. So there are many solutions out there that allows you to put your application up in their system, and then they will let many testers test your application. Here the downside is that actually it means that you have no kind of control of who is testing it. I'm not sure about the quality of the defects. I haven't tried it myself, but this is what I am hearing from other people. And the knowledge that you gained in testing the application is not something that you can acquire and have it in-house. The third option is actually not to test, which is something that can cost you money, as we just saw. So you can just put your head in the sand and hope that everything will be fine. But as we all know, since code and since applications are being written and built by humans, we are all humans and we are making mistakes. So if we don't test, it means that our users will have problems, which will hurt the quality and will hurt our brand. The last option that you can have is you can actually give your users the ability to test for you. There is a functionality of A/B testing or gradual exposure, so you can give it to your users. It's not relevant for all of the applications, especially for the B2B, it's less relevant, but some companies are using this way of testing, so they simply put it out for their users and they report the problems, and of course they monitor it and everything. Or the last thing, and this is what we are going to spend the rest of the time, is to talk about how to use analytics in order to mitigate the risk. So, analytics. Here is an example. Okay, this is our product tree of a real product that is being used here. The product is called Storm and Load. And what you can see here is the list of features here, the theme and the feature and the different flows that the product has. And on the right part, what you see is the amount of environments that we need to validate it on. You can see here that we have the status of each of the different environment, and what we are doing every time that we want to release, and we have a monthly release, is that we as the testing team take this table and we make sure that we cover everything, and once everything is green, then we are ready to ship to production and to release a new version to our customer. So this is how we are managing it today. So just an overview of our product and what it means that we need to test and to make sure that all functionality behaves and we don't have any regression defects. So my product has 30 features. My supported metrics, meaning that we need to validate it on 10 different environments, and an environment means that we have an operating system that has a browser inside it, and the testing team has 10 testers. For the sake of this example, we will say that testing a feature on an environment will take us 1 day. Of course, some features take much more and some takes much less, but just for the sake of the argument, we will give it 1 day. And we can say that the target regression cycle that we are required as the testing team should be less than 3 days. And this is because if we have a monthly release, what we are doing is that we are developing for about 3 weeks. We are developing new content, we are testing this new content, we are fixing these defects, and then what we do is that in the last week we are running a regression cycle, and this cycle is targeted to be less than 3 days. So if we will do a quick math, what we have is we have 30 features and we need to test them on 10 different combinations, because we said that each day, each feature on one combination will take us 1 day. it means that we are required to have 300 days in order to validate the entire application. Since I have 10 testers in my testing team, it means that I am required to test the application in parallel. If I will spread the load between the different testers, I will need a total of 30 calendar days. Okay, but if you remember, I am required to do everything in less than 3 days. So how can this be done? So I would like to introduce you to Google Analytics. If you are not familiar with that, then Google Analytics is a freemium web analytics service that is being offered by Google that helps you track and report a website, and it also has support for a mobile application. This service has been around for the last 12 years, and this was after Google acquired a startup called Orchi. Today, Google Analytics is the most widely used web analytics service. There are many others. There are many paid solutions that help you monitor your application in production. I would like to note here that I am not affiliated with Google Analytics in any way. I am sharing this because this is the product and this is the service that we are using here to monitor our application. And if you will go to the link below, you can get all the details of which websites and what is the percentage of websites today that are using Google Analytics. Okay. So the first use case that can help you focus and right-size your testing and your regression is called environment optimization. What it helps you do is help you focus on the majority of combination, meaning you don't need to test on everything and on every different combination that you need to support, but rather focus on the majority of it. You can easily reduce your risk to a minimum, and the areas that you are not testing, that you can wait for customer feedback on any specific environment or combination that you didn't cover. So let's see it live. What we are about to do is go to the actual live instance of Google Analytics. So here I have my own Google Analytics account, and what I'm about to show you is give you a real example. In the first one, I'm going to show you one of our systems that is being monitored, and in the second use case that we are going to discuss, I'm going to use the demo account that is available free for all. You just need to register with your Google account. Okay. So what we will now do is go to Google Analytics. Just as a quick overview, in case you are not familiar with Google Analytics, then here you can switch between the different environment that you are monitoring. On the left part, you get all of the different environments. We are going to focus mostly on the basic stuff. Google Analytics is a very advanced tool. But I'm just going to show you how easy it is to get value from just using the basic stuff. So we are talking about environment optimization, and what I want to get from Google Analytics is the ability to understand what are the most common browsers that my users are using in production. So here what we have in the audience section is the overview tab. Here I can see all of the different sessions that I have, and also a breakdown of the different demographic, system, mobile, and languages. Now what I want to do is to move to the browser breakdown. So here you can see a highlight of the different browsers that my customers are using. What I will do now is I will go to the full report. And see that I have Firefox and Chrome. But because every combination that I have is based on operating system together with a browser, then I need to add a secondary dimension. Google Analytics helps you and you can easily add the operating system as the secondary dimension. Okay, so if we will see now that in case I will test my application on Firefox on Windows and on Firefox on Chrome, I will pretty much have a basic coverage of my entire application, because this is actually what my customers are using in production. Okay, in case I want to have an additional drill in, okay, so I can see exactly on which windows my customers are using, then I can quickly switch to the operating system and add the operating system version as the secondary dimension, and then I can see exactly which are the top environment that my customers are using in production. So for example, I have Windows 7 and Windows 8.1, and this pretty much sums everything almost to 100%. So this gives me the ability of how I can minimize my entire regression and focus only on the relevant environments that are being used in production. So let's switch to our slides again, and let's do the math again. So I still have 30 features that I need to test, but rather than test on the entire 10 combinations, I can now focus only on the two major combinations, which as we just saw, is actually Firefox and Chrome on a Windows machine, probably Windows 7, because this we saw was the majority. So doing the math, it means that I have 60 days now, rather than the entire 300 days. And because I still have my 10 testers in the testing team, which means that I'm now required to have 6 calendar days in order to run the regression cycle on my application. 6 is a nicer number than 300, but it's not yet as low as I want, which is the target of 3 days. The asterisk here is actually meaning that we are not completely covering the application, but this gives us a confidence of 89%, which is pretty high compared to the fact that we reduced it from 30 days to 6 days. So if we can do, and we will do kind of a risk calculator later in the presentation, then we can calculate the risk and make sure that it is actually worth the risk here. So let's go to our example. And now what we are doing is we are actually focusing only on the two use cases. We are testing the entire application, but only focusing on these two environments rather than testing everything. So this is how we can narrow down and test only on the majority of the environments that are being used in production. The second use case is help you focus more on not only the environment that the customers are using, but also on their behavior. Okay, what we will do now is that we will use analytics to help us focus on what is the majority of the functionality that our users are using. So we will target the most active areas and wait for the customer feedback on other areas, and this can be easily achieved by measuring the percentage of escape defects. We will cover that later on in the presentation, what is exactly an escape defect. And here what we do, we are again using a calculated risk in order to reduce the regression time while still having good confidence on what we test and how our users will use the applications. Okay, so let's see it live again. So now what I will do is go to the demo application, the demo account that Google is supplying. Again, you can simply register to it. It is available for everyone. You get all the data, all the information, and in case you want to start and playing with it before even implementing it in your own application, then you can easily do that. What I will do now is I will actually move to another area, which is the behavior. Okay, so what I will do now is I will go and see the behavior flow. The behavior flow actually gives me a very nice idea of exactly where and what my customers are doing and what are the flows that they are doing. So we can see that here that they are coming from different landing pages, and then they are moving to the starting page. They have several interaction, and this way I can actually mimic and understand exactly what my users are doing. But that's not enough. What I can also see, and here what I get is the list of features presented here as the different pages in this demo application that my users are actually using. You can see that there are almost 400 different pages, and these are the most common ones. So I can see that the majority of the customers are spending time in the home, in the basket, in the sign-in, and I can see the drill-in exactly of where my users are using. And if you will implement it in your own application, then you will get it mostly out of the box without the need of having to add custom configuration. So if I will focus only on the 10 different use cases, the 10 most common use cases, I will kind of get to a confidence of very nice percentage of coverage of my application and focusing only on the majority of the features without the need of testing everything. So this helps me focus on the major features that my customers are using and not on everything. So let's say that we will focus on the 12 features, the 12 most common features that my users are using on only the two combinations that we saw before. Doing the simple math, this gives me 24 days. Since I now have 10 testers, it means that now my regression cycle will be 2.4 days, which is perfect because this is the target that we wanted to achieve, which should be lower than 3 days. So if we go to the example, to the second part, what we are doing is that we are now cross-checking both the most common environments together with the most common areas and feature and focus only on them, not spending time on anything that is not relevant or that a very small amount of users are using that. So what we can do now is we can easily take this information and build a very nice risk calculator. Remember that we began with the number of 300 days. It means that we are testing everything, every permutation and every feature on every environment. We then moved to all the functionalities, but only on the top combination, the two different browsers, on the two different operating systems, and this brought us down to 60 days. Once we drill into only the main features, only the core capabilities, only the main functionality on the top combination, then we reduced it to 24 days. This kind of gives us the different levels that we have for building the risk calculator. You could also add more levels based on your need and the time that you have to test. What I forgot to say is that by minimizing the features that I am testing and on the two combination, I got to a confidence on 76% based on the information that I got from production, which is very good confidence of testing based on the amount of time that we reduced. So let's see how the risk calculator looks like. So here what we have, which you can start with a very low number, which should be very, very quick. So you will probably cover only the top flows and only one operating system and browser. That should give you kind of a 50% coverage. You can then move to the next level of 75%, which covers the main functionalities and the top combinations of browsers and operating system. You can then move to more functionalities and still the top combination. You can move to keeping test the entire functionalities and adding additional combination. And on the most right part, you can test everything. So this gives you a very nice idea of what is the confidence level that you will do and how much time you will invest in each one of these different regression cycles. There is another thing that analytics can help us identify, which is actually zombie tests. And what are zombie tests? So let's quickly move again to our application. So zombie tests are actually areas that exist in the application, but actually nobody uses them. So if we will go, for example, let's move to the very basic browser overview, okay? What we can see is that, for example, if we'll drill into the different browser and go to the full report, okay? Then if we will go, for example, to the last page, okay? And let's even move to the first page, but let's focus for a second on Opera, okay? So what we see is that less than 0.5% of the users are using Opera. Now, I'm not saying that it is a bad browser or anything, but I'm just saying that for us as the testing team, this is a risk that is probably worth taking, okay? So I can invest less or test Opera every once in a while and not in every regression cycle, because if I will test Opera, I might find some defect, but the fact that less than 0.5% of my users are using that is actually not worth the time investing, and I would rather spend the time and effort on testing the majority of the browsers and the application and the features. So this is the zombie tests. Okay, another thing that I hear sometimes when having this discussion is the ability, what happens in case I don't have any analytics? What happens if I have my on-premise application and I still want to improve my testing? So first, what you can do is you can use market analysis and statistics. These are just two different information and websites that you can use. They provide different information and statistics that they cover. They are free to use. These are the ones that I am familiar with and that I am using. So you can just click the link and use them, and it provides you with great feedback. They also have different breakdown based on location or based on technology, and there are many other sources that provide these kind of information. In case you don't have the ability to access, or you are using other technology than web or mobile, then another great way to get information on your users is to conduct an annual user survey. So what we do here is that we are sending to the entire customers a short survey every half a year to make sure that they are still using the same features and that they are still using our products the way that we think and the way that we test it. And this can help and give great information even if you don't have a live monitoring of your application. The last thing that you can do is you can run and use customer validations. There are many practices on how on how to do that. You can do it even before developing your new features or your application. So you can talk to the customer, make sure that the solution that you are about to build will actually answer their problems. And then you can also have this kind of validation after they have used your product, so you can get their idea and feedback and feel exactly what they think. And a quick word about test automation and how you can use what we just discussed and to apply it to test automation. So the practices that I just showed you can be applied to many testing methodologies, whether it's your manual regression, your performance testing, your load testing, your usability testing, but you can also apply it to test automation. And how you can do that? Remember the calculator that we did? So you can use this same way to define what you want to run on which of the different pipelines. So for example, if you are using your CI, which is actually the continuous integration that depending on how fast you are running it, then it should be something that is very fast. So here a good idea is to run the 50% coverage as part of the CI flow. And then in case you have a longer nightly process, then you can run the 90% or the 75%. It really depends on you. And the last full regression, you can either go with the 95 or the 100% based on how much and when this is running. Okay, so a summary, and then we will open this to questions. So first, we don't have time to test everything, okay? Even if we wanted, there are too many permutations, there are too many devices, there are too many browsers, and we don't have time to test everything. Get to know your users, whether it is how I just showed by using analytics, or whether you can conduct the validations, or you can conduct the user survey. Make sure that you know your users and know how and what and when they are using your application. Next, you should calculate your risk. If you can reduce your regression time or your entire testing, if we will take even just the first use case of the environment optimization and test on 2 different browsers and operating system, and reduce the entire regression cycle by almost 5 times shorter, but still get a high confidence in your application, then this is a risk that is worth taking. And make sure that you measure your untested areas. Meaning that if you remember when we covered Chrome and Firefox, then we got to a coverage of 89%. The 11%, this is something that we can monitor. And the way that you can monitor it is actually measuring escape defects. Escape defects is the percentage of defects that you get from customers that weren't found as part of your testing activities. And this can be easily measured because probably every customer will declare or will report this issue, and then you can see how much did you kind of miss. And in case this falls under your untested area, then it might even be worth to add this specific area to your testing plan and increase the coverage by a bit. The last item that you can measure is your customer satisfaction. So whether you can see the comments or the ratings on the different Google stores, or whether you are tracking that as part of the same customer survey. This is another way to make sure that all of the customers are satisfied. So, last sentence, and then we are going to open it to questions again. So you don't have time to test everything. You need to calculate your risk, and you need to make sure that what you're not testing, you are measuring, and make sure that your customers are satisfied. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for taking the time and being part of this great webinar. You can see my contact. I have my Twitter at Bendet_Ori. So feel free to send me any comments or any feedback. on what I just showed you. And if you want, this is my email, so it's r2d2@hpe.com. This is really my email. I know that some people don't think that, but you can give it a try and send me an email, and that's it. So, questions?
Thank you, Ori, for taking us through that very detailed session, and I'm sure most of our audience will take back some tricks to apply to their testing now. We have a couple of questions with us right now, which we will be taking up. So the first thing is that since you have been applying analytics-driven testing at HPE, so the first question is what sort of success have you seen right now, or how much faster have your testing processes become as a result of this?
So the example that I showed you is actually a live one. So we are able to reduce our regression time from our manual regression time from 30 days to 2.4, and simply because we focused only on the main environments and the main capabilities, and not test everything every time that we release a new product or a new release to the air.
All right. So also in response to this, so when you're doing analytics-driven testing and using Google Analytics for it, have you faced any sort of challenges or difficulties up until this point? Some data that you were not able to figure out, or some things that cannot be found out from Google Analytics, and hence you have to do it the old way?
Yeah, so Google Analytics out of the box give you a very nice coverage. That there are some, let's call it custom events within each application that Google Analytics is not able to monitor as part of its out-of-the-box configuration. And this will actually require your development team to change and to modify and to code some changes into the application in order for it to be shown on the Google Analytics. So if there are any specific events that are interested for you, you will need to invest some more time. Having said that, even the basic Google Analytics implementation, which most of the time is just a couple of lines of copy-paste code that you need to insert into your application, will give you a lot of benefit by just investing this time.
Okay. So the next question we have is that we have one of our audience who is working on a project that's being built from scratch. So how would you suggest, or what would you suggest to accelerate their testing process when they do not have any analytical data for it?
Yep. Okay. So that's actually a great question, and here I would like to go and spend the time of this to just show you one of the sources that I gave here. Okay. So just as a quick, I will quickly open it so you can see it. So here, what you get is you can look at it as industry standard, or what are the most common browsers. So you can just take a look on what is the most active ones. So in case you're starting from scratch and you don't have any real information on your user, you can assume that, for example, the majority of them will probably use Chrome to begin with. Okay, we know that some, for example, organization has different types of browsers allowed, but you can assume that these will be the majority of them. There is another link that I shared that you can also use that also gives you a very nice breakdown. So these kind of not give you real production information, but it can give you a kind of an assumption of what will your users probably use, and you can use it and you can see the different trends, you can see the different breakdowns, and use that as a way of starting your tests. Okay.
Great. So I think yes, that definitely helps. One other question that we have is that while using Google Analytics to speed up your testing, is there any sort of checklist that needs to be kept in mind and things that you should have in place beforehand, or things that you should and should not do, so that it gives you the maximum sort of benefit?
There is no checklist that we used, but what I can share is that sometimes what will happen is that if we'll take, for example, the first example that I shared with you, which is to test only on Chrome and Firefox, then it doesn't mean that your testing is bulletproof. And by the way, all testing is not bulletproof. And what happened is that sometimes we get a specific request or specific issue report from a customer stating, hey, I have problems with Internet Explorer. And this is one of the escape defects that we have. And what happens is that in this case, we just make sure that this issue is fixed. It is also very good to add a specific automated test that covers this specific problem, and then it is added to the rest of the pipeline, and we have coverage even for these items.
All right. I think we have sort of one last question here. So, alongside using Google Analytics for testing, are there any other sort of best practices or other sort of habits probably that your QA team needs to have in order to get the maximum benefit from using Google Analytics?
So what I can say is that you can start with using that even only for one of the use cases. So just minimize or optimize the environment so you can make sure that you test only on only on the major browsers, and then kind of wait to see how your users are behaving. So not jump ship and go all analytics at the beginning, but do it gradual. So start with the first use case, make sure that it actually works and you don't get a lot of escape defects from your customers, and then move to the next use case of also focusing on the major functionality, and then continue using it on a regular basis.
Great. So I think that is all the questions that we have right now. And if any other members of our audience have any other questions, you can definitely send them to us at webinars@srijan.net, or send them into Ori directly, as you can see his Twitter and email ID up on your screens right now. So that's it from us today. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and once again, thank you Ori for taking us through that very insightful presentation. It was a pleasure to have you, and to our audience, I would just remind that you would get a mail in your inbox within the next 24 hours with Ori's entire slide deck and the video from the session. So once again, thanks everyone for joining us. That's all from us today.
Bye bye. Thank you very much.